front end, right? Okay, automation, all that is there. So even QA devs, whoever can do that. But the foremost problem that we see today in the Sri Lankan context, as in the world, is primarily in the Sri Lankan context, building this quality mindset. Good afternoon. Okay. So I'm Dilhan, and my topic here is about lessons learned in test automation. So the primary reason I just want to share some of our experience that came through the current company and the past organizations we work with is to kind of build and share the knowledge that's around us, so that we can really help the community and bring about this test automation as a subject that will really help us as a community in the current world, right? So we are going to actually talk about few things. Essence of this session, which I'm going to spend for 20 minutes, is based on some experience gained, right? And some mistakes made, and the risks that we have taken, as well as success and failures that has gone through throughout a kind of a decade in terms of handling automation with clients and various projects, right? So the main thing is at the end of this session, if you can take at least 2 to 3 points out of my talk, that would be the best thing that I would hope for, right? Okay, let's start. So lessons learned, right? So lessons, so that means a lot of mistakes, right? So who has made mistakes in test automation? Anybody? Okay, perfect. So we are at the real correct location, I would say. So I personally throughout my career has made a lot of mistakes in terms of test automation. So I like to share a few things so that we may actually prevent certain things happening in the future, and maybe get some insights, and later on discuss how we can, kind of solve this at a better level, right? So first and foremost, the main lesson I think we should all understand, and a lot of people, especially juniors coming into the industry, as well as the senior management who we work with, primarily from the management perspective as well as software engineering perspective, the lesson that we've always kind of overlook is that test automation, it's software, right? So we are writing software to test another software, right? So that's the basic principle that we have to understand. So with that, we have an array of complexities that are coming in and uncertainties. So it's not about just trying to automate a test and try to say you automated that. It's not about just getting a automation on a web or a mobile and saying we have covered it. No, it's about a longer term thing. How do you maintain it? How do you take results? How do you kind of grow with it with a ROI? And how do you really facilitate to bring in value to your organization, right? So how does architecture works, right? So software, so it's not about just another test we do in terms of manually, right? So we look at architecture. So considering architecture from a different point of view is very important. Looking at a role in terms of supporting this, so we will always need someone to guide us, right? As a ship has a captain to guide us through automation, we will always need a QA architect role. Maybe it may be a software engineer who's coming, maybe a junior guy, but we need to have this role, right? So a big lesson I've learned throughout the last few years is that we need to consider this at a high level. Why? Because we are dealing with software, right? And a team working with co-automation. Maybe it's just a one guy, maybe a two-man team. It doesn't matter who looks at the architecture and who looks at the co-work, scripting. So there are two distinct roles. So how do we do that, and how do we look at in a kind of a larger organization, product-based organization, maybe client-based organization, is how we can kind of keep a smaller team looking at the maintenance of a framework, right? Career progression, it's very important, as well as continuous learning and innovations and trends. So the idea here is we are dealing with software, guys. We are not dealing with just trying to automate something and get something done just to show management that the coverage can be taken. No, it's not that. It's about how we can achieve pass rates and keep on giving automation value to our end users as well as our development teams and the other stakeholders, right? So the first and foremost lesson that I think I need to share, and I think we all would agree, is that it's software. We cannot take it light, right? We cannot take it light. We have to have a strategy in order to build a team, right? A team which has career progression, with a team which has continuous learning and innovation. We'll have to keep on nurturing a team to ensure that we solve these problems on a time. So a big lesson learned is about how you build up a team. So especially with front-end automation, because it's more brittle as well as flaky, it can break, right? So how we consider this is the main lesson I want to start off with, right? Okay, second one is the context matters. So context driven. So what is a context? So you're today in a situation, you're here with us, so context is different. So should have been at work, right? But now you're with us at this session, and so similar to that, the automation, how we handle things, maybe a front end, web, mobile or whatever, context matters, right? So business domain matters. So maybe I present something from a cake labs experience might totally differ from your organization. So today we might show you something, but you might not be able to apply it at your organization. So understanding that and not just trying to replicate things without understanding the context will get you into big trouble, which has got us also into big trouble in the past, right? So business domain, technical stack, right? Platforms, devices, right? Data complexities, technical debt from your previous software, maybe things like not having proper unit test, which had in your previous application, which you had to have a lot of UI functional tests, right? And certain organization cultures does matter prior to getting into automation. So if you are a new guy who's a QA lead or an automation lead or a manager or a junior guy who comes into a new organization and tries to maybe replicate certain things that you have done in the past, maybe you will get into a bit of a cultural shock. So a lesson learned, it's about the context, right? Moving on, the value addition. So most of the automation, if you look at, maybe you would agree to saying your manager, any managers have said to you, get 100% automation or get automation done for all test. Anybody? Okay, few, many more, right? So every organization will blindly say, go for automation, do automation at the front end or API level, right? But the problem here is that, what is the value, right? So we have to consider the return on investment. So ROI matters. So while the long-term orientation and a release plan matters. So if your release is done in 2 to 3 cycles, then should you really automate? So that is a big question. So we will spend a lot of, maybe 10 times more of a time for a one regression build to be executed manual to invest on automation, the framework and the script execution, right? So does it really matter? Should we really do that? Is a kind of a question, right? A big lesson learned there is that most of the organizations blindly think, okay, the solution is automation. No, it's not. Maybe manually testing it to a certain level, maybe is a solution if there is only just 1 or 2 bills that is needed for the client, right? But if it's having a product which is going to be having multiple releases, changes, maintenance throughout the organization, if the product has a roadmap and you can really define it, then definitely you have to instill automation into your part of your culture and DNA, right? So most of the organization, the failures in automation happens due to the value not being added, right? So that's a big lesson learned from my experience. So front end, right? Okay, automation, all that is there. So even QA devs, whoever can do that. But the foremost problem that we see today in the Sri Lankan context, as in the world, is primarily in the Sri Lankan context, building this quality mindset, right? So if you really look at Toyota, like a production company, or Boeing or Airbus, the idea is that they don't have automation as a separate part or quality as a separate part. You don't fly airlines and then try to test it. Do they do that? No, right? You don't drive cars and you try to, maybe at a stress level you will do, but you won't drive it and try to test whether it fails or not, right? So the idea is quality is inbuilt to your practice. So we will, if we try to just look at the automation aspect only, we would have a quality mindset built into the engineering process, right? So if we really consider the statement, quality is everyone's responsibility. Edward Deming, the famous quality guru in the world who defined, if we can do that, if we can really enforce that into our DNA through our software engineering practices, then front end automation will be a success. So in my next slide, I'll share why that is. But if you don't instill this quality responsibility throughout, what will happen is that you will have a sub practice which doesn't add value, and your automation will be there from front end level, but your code really is not there. Your code quality to your unit test coverage, to your basic maintainability will not be there, right? So having this philosophy at a higher level at the organization is important. So maybe today you're a software engineering, a QA engineer, maybe you're a lead or a manager. So what you will need to really emphasize here is that you'll have to build it from the start and make devs also responsible for the entire aspect, right? So looking at this aspect what I shared, so let's say we have a good 80% coverage or 90% coverage in automation, and if we really don't have good quality software, so does it make sense to have automation? Well, obviously not, right? So if you look at the quality engineering focus, what we are considering at our organization, as well as I think mainly all the product based organization, we don't just focus on test automation, right? So we evangelize more on the code quality, getting abstraction, decoupling, cohesion done, so that we can really have the devs to write their code in a better way, right? So things like Sonak, ESLint being integrated into your daily builds and getting static code analysis done is a must, right? So then again, the question is, front-end automation. Can we automate our tests? Manually, can QA team do that? Yes, obviously we can do that. But if we don't have our unit test coverage, what will happen? We will have a lot of UI front-end tests which are just going to be flaky and going to be brittle and break when it's not properly maintained. So having a culture which promotes more TDD based, or at least a unit testing based organization is very important. If not, we will be adding a lot of UI level tests, which obviously doesn't really make sense at a long term, right? And code reviews, the practices, maybe these are very small things, but these are the lessons learned, so that we need to really practice them and continuously monitor that. It will help the journey of test automation, right? And test automation without continuous integration with tools like Jenkins, right, or Hudson being not integrated, it doesn't really make sense as well. So if you are looking at an end-to-end product platform and supporting with multiple reporting, we'll have to have the whole array distilled to your quality engineering focus, right? So again, if you are strategizing to look at test automation as a solution for some of your problems in testing, cut down time, I think you can focus on that. But if you focus on it without considering the rest, obviously you're going for a failure, right? So test strategy is very important. Having your pyramid properly articulated is what I really mean here. So if you have your UI as your Selenium core, having your front-end test cases automated, that's really great. But if you have this pyramid upside down, it really doesn't make sense, because you're going to have a lot of automation which is having a lot of UI execution time, right? So it's obviously going to break if it's flaky, right? So what you should do today is that, and you might really ask me, okay, why are we like trying to promote devs and try to give them to do unit testing? It's not that. If we can focus and tell them to, push them to do more unit tests, what will happen is that we can focus more on a consistent UI automation, as well as we can go into more exploratory tests. The idea of logical and simple calculation based or maybe edge cases not being popping up might be really be a solution if we instill a unit and a service API level culture, and then get them to do more automation, as well as we build a strategy around UI automation to look at the end-to-end flows, right? So most of the projects I have dealt with, this problem is there, and the clients always try to come and say, can we automate? Can we get this sorted? This is the solution that always, so as a country, as a organizations, as a test automation based in Colombo and Sri Lanka, we should evangelize on the correct thing to the world, rather than just trying to say, let's do UI, let's do Selenium at the higher level. We should do that, but considering these, we should consult and recommend the strategy to the organizations that we deal with to improve on this, right? Then the main very interesting area, a big lesson for a long time learned and still learning, is quality of your test process. So one of the biggest key challenges in I think automation is that we may have the best automation, right? But if we don't have our proper test design, okay, we don't have our test case review process in place, right? If we don't have a proper test level integrated, that is unit integration system acceptance, and identified our proper test types like functional, regression, sanity, and retesting, we are going to fail, right? So if we don't have proper optimized test cases, okay, so we will always end up automating useless test cases, right? So this is one big problem that the industry faces. Getting a test case done to the level that we can really ensure coverage is, I think, a lesson that should be learned throughout the industry as well, right? So this can be applied to regression, maybe a minimum regression, smoke, or whatever build acceptance test. So how do we encourage this and build this team? So a critical piece of a QA engineer or maybe the automation engineer would be to first look at this. So most of the engineers who are starting off with their career as well, they will come and say they like to do automation. But then again, if we ask them how to write a test to get a scenario done, that's lacking. So I think as engineers, we should have the automation aspect as well as be great in test design and optimizing tests in a way that we have real ROI coming in. Okay, and finally the agile testing focus today. So we primarily work on more agile based testing, every organization. So any company working with agile testing, Scrum, can you raise your hands please? Right, so great. So I think many of you are working on that. So articulating this strategy prior to getting into automation is very important. How do you share your scenarios? How do you prevent issues rather than getting it in the different? So there it might really help on even the front end automation that we plan, right? Methodology for delivery. So now let's say we are doing automation, right? So how do we give an estimate to a client? How do you say, okay, how do we really give our senior management a delivery timeline? So these are tough questions, right? So sometimes biggest mistake we have done in the past is that we just count the test cases, maybe 100 test cases, put a time into that and give, okay, let's say 2 weeks, we will get this automated. But then again, when we go into dig into deep level, we figure out lot of uncertainties, complexities that may come just by writing or automating a test case doesn't really give you better ability to estimate. So what we've done mostly in the past is that the slicing of these tasks have been done in a very different way. So if we consider web application, right, front end, we consider the web the page objects, right, separately. We estimate maybe how much of time page objects creation will take, right. We will slice the task again for functional libraries as well as the test script. So we will identify in a web page what are the common functional libraries. We will estimate for that rather than estimating as a whole, and then we'll look at the test scripts, maybe looking at the test case and taking it into automation. We will ensure code reviews are done for that particular test. We will do local runs before saying we are done, and automation execution maybe at a device farm or maybe at a parallel level, and we will do the results analysis and then consider about maintenance, script failures, or maybe environment issues. So we have to take everything into consideration if we are looking at a delivery, right. That is the doneness if you call in a sprint, right. So we'll have to look at this aspect prior to saying we are done with automation. So most of the teams and projects, we just try to test scripts, and maybe with local runs we might not be able to really, the context may be different. So this is a big lesson learned, and this has really helped us to estimate things and properly monitor things in the time to come, right. And think end to end. So mostly if you're in a product company where you have multiple integration, multiple devices, multiple stacks, so how do you integrate your test automation in one universal platform? That is a common issue that I think we all face, right. So what we've done at Cake is that we've actually look at all the products that come together. So we have from a POS to a guest manager to a payment to a Cake Connect, how we have kind of integrated this. So we have to think end to end. So there are integrations between this, right. So there are multiple integrations connecting, and how we will need to test. So how do we have a universal framework that helps automation? So if one product is done through maybe Java and one through JavaScript, one through another thing, that's going to be a problem, right. So how do we really kind of maintain, and how do you onboard our engineers? That's going to be a big problem. So one has Java and the other has JS. So how are we going to hire JS guys? So can we hire Java guys today? So that's a challenge, right. So how do you make it universal and get the onboarding, training, the career progression sorted? So how do you look at multi-channel devices, browsers? How do you look at test suites? How do you look at environments in the say test, staging, production? How do you consider this at an end-to-end level, and how do you consider global reporting and dashboards? These are the things that you need to consider when it comes to building automation, and mostly the failures occur. Maybe the global dashboards are not thought through. Maybe the environments are not thought through. Maybe the integrations are not thought through, right? So these are typical challenges we've also faced. We're trying to streamline everything together. Right? And matrices. So a good thing is, so would you like to see your project matrices maybe showcased somewhere? I mean, would you like to see that defect rates and all that? Maybe not, or maybe yes, maybe not, right? But if you can instill a practice where you can actually kind of showcase your teams and your projects velocities, maybe the automation coverage, maybe the unit coverage, maybe the front end coverage, this will really push the teams, right? So weekly reporting happening every week, saying that your automation coverage through the global organization and the QA and dev teams will really encourage people culturally and emotionally to improve, right? So that's also a big change that we've done, and we've improved that really helps, because the challenge is that when people get to see their project is doing well with automation and improving the coverage, they always feel satisfied. Even the teams who haven't done maybe certain level of with certain level technical debt would consider onboarding and getting. So if you do this for around 9 to 12 months, you will see results. All new projects onboarding will have unit tests, you will have API, they will definitely get that coverage and they will always plan for it. If not, they will never do that, right? So a cultural change, another lesson learned, and a failure to kind of omit is having coverages at a low level and not being maintained, right? And the main or the final item that I want to share was on the test results, right? So mainly guys, the coverage is, yes, it's good. Automatable coverage increasing is very important, but if your pass rate is not there, then there is no point, right? So that's a big lesson learned. So how do you achieve the pass rate? That should be your main goal. It's not only about the coverage, and how do you do the results analysis and defect reporting. These should be thought through if you're looking into any front end or any other automation aspect as well. If you don't think through of this, what will happen is you will have only the coverage aspect done, but not the maintenance, right? So the rerun strategies, how do you do that? How do you enforce that? How do you, if there are script failures, how do you do manual sign off? What's the process in that? So if you have 100 test cases, 10 are failing. So what's the solution? Do you tell your automation guys to do manual runs? Yes, that may be a strategy going forward as well, right? And how do you kind of categorize the failures? Through maybe defects, obviously you will catch, maybe script issues, right? Maybe data or environment, and maybe configuration issues. How do you categorize through your reporting and give the results to maybe your client or your stakeholders that this is what has really happened, right? So this is a kind of a lesson learned is when results are not properly distributed, we will always come into a situation that the ROI, the visibility, the management will never be happy with you, right? So with that, I think one quote that I want to share is that certain things are very small, results, maybe defect reporting, maybe CI, maybe kind of getting your test case done. So the idea is, as professionals who are always improving day to day, if you do little things well, right? Don't think about the frameworks and supporting multiple products and architecture, but if you do the little things well, and if you encourage your juniors and your teams to do that, you will definitely achieve big things, right? That's the biggest, actually the lesson I have learned is that no matter what presentation or talk that we do, we have to have execution from the smallest thing or the atomic thing that we do, right? So Robin Sharma declares this very perfectly. The way you do the little things says a lot about the way you do big things, right? So with that, I sign off, and thank you. I hope you had some few items to take home. So our objective of organizing this was to start small and to do even a good show this time, and maybe take this as annual conference so that we keep on practicing and making Sri Lanka a hub for good test automation and quality engineering practices, right? So I think we have a good start, and thank you very much for coming and spending your time. And thank you for all the organizations, and thanks. Have a good evening. Right, thanks.